Welcome to the Enterprise Mobility Roundup podcast, brought to you by Bluefletch. We discuss technology topics related to Android and workforce devices and how they intersect with business and mobility.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bluefletch Mobility Roundup. I'm here today with Richard Makerson, my business partner, and we're the partners here at Bluefletch. And today we're going to talk about the 7 steps to successful Android POCs in the enterprise. And this is based on a article that Richard wrote, I think about a year or two ago, specifically around this. And we get a lot of questions on POCs, and a lot of people leverage us to do those. Where when you want to do something, bring in the guys that are fast at it. So we're pretty good at that. And I guess just to get us started and do some framing here, what is a POC? Can you talk about that? Like what is your viewpoint on what a POC is or what a POC should be?
So in Australia, they'll call it a POC, we call it POC here, but it's a proof of concept. So it's when you want to invest a little bit of time and money to prove that something is either going to work, or you'll get the ROI that you want, or you'll have the great experience that you have before you spend, a truckload of money on a solution or or piss somebody off in, operations.
Don't make enemies. I guess what are the types of POCs our teams are typically involved in? You want to talk about what those look like?
Yeah. So, for us being in mobility, typically it's a new device. So either a legacy device, I'm moving from a Windows CE, or in recent times moving away from iOS to a new Android device. You could be upgrading devices, or I have no device at all and I don't know which form factor is going to work. It could be new software. So we're moving from, a legacy system to a new system, whether that's homegrown, it could be SAP, Oracle, either one of the big WMSs like Manhattan or Blue Yonder. And then we often get it a lot of times for, Bluefletch Enterprise. So many of our customers want to have a proof of concept or a POC on our launcher and single sign-on and some of our quick reauthentication methods, just to prove that the use case they think will actually work out in the field for them.
Got it. And why specifically are proof of concepts important? Like what's the who's doing it and why is it of value?
Well, you want to test and validate, right? These companies are big and massive. I'll use the Home Depot because they're in our backyard and we do a lot of work with them. They have around 2,000 stores here in the United States. And so if they're going to roll out a solution, they have to do it 2,000 times. And in those stores, there are, hundreds of people that work in them. So the impact is really big. And so you want to test and validate, with a small group or a small set before you hit, the rest of the organization. Mature organizations understand that, POCs are meant to save money. So you have to spend a little bit of money to save a lot of money. Oftentimes, people think that, you can just grab a box off the shelf, or, we can just push this out and roll it out everywhere and we won't have any issues, or we're not going to learn anything new because, other big company did it. But no, mature organizations realize, if you test a little bit, there are great learnings along the way and you can save money. And the best example I can give is like sample paint, right? Like if you want to paint a room.
You're doing a home renovation right now.
I'm doing a home renovation right now. So this is close to my heart. And we did it with hardwood floors. We put, we sanded our floors. My house is almost 100 years old. And we put 4 stains down. And we looked at it for 30, 45 minutes. But, the stain we ended up with was not one of the top 3 stains we went with. It was a mixture of the two. Once we had the 3 down, the 4th was, what if we did a mixture of those 2? And, we learned something new. We put it down. And because of that, we didn't spend a ton of money staining all the floors throughout the house and either not loving it and having to restain it, or living with it and not being really happy with it.
Living with it. The next 5 years, your wife is like, I told you it's the wrong color, honey. I told you it's the wrong color.
Yep.
All right. So getting into the 7 areas, the first area you called out was the discovery and definition or requirements gathering. You talk about that a little bit. What are the key things when you think about being successful, why is discovery and requirements important to you?
Well, you need to know where you start from, right? Like if you don't want to repeat history, you have to write it down and you have to teach it and you have to learn about it. So understanding what current state is, also understanding your limitations. You don't want to test everything. You really want to have a controlled state that's manageable and, feel okay with, burning that time or burning that investment in resources or money. But then you want to also just understand, okay, what are we trying to learn? What are the things that are going to prove that this is successful or not? But then also, how do you allocate resources? And so, one of the things we did with a partner here, a utility company that was local, was they brought in one resource from around the organization that was going to be impacted by this POC, and they all had skin in the game. And so that helped us understand everybody's current state, how it was going to affect everybody, what change did everybody want to see, but then also, where was the investment in time and resources going to come from?
Yeah, and for me, I always think about this as the doc that defines this is it's a project charter. So having a POC charter, so it doesn't need to be huge, but it needs to be, here's the 3 pages that when we get in an argument about what we should be doing, everybody can look at this and say, yeah, this is what we agreed on at the beginning. And then the other thing I always think about is I call it the requirements spreadsheet, but come up with, when you meet with all stakeholders, here's the 200 requirements that people said. And then as a team, we agree, here's the top 5. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to evaluate these 190 other ones. We're just going to do these top 5. And this is going to be what we use to measure and know, we're aligned to the actual definition of what we're looking for out of this POC.
Yep. Also helps helicoptering execs that come in, keep them honest. And they're like, why aren't we testing this other thing? Well, here are the 5 things that we all agreed on 6 months ago.
I like how you call them. I call them the seagull execs. They fly in, poop and everything, make a lot of noise, and then leave.
Yes.
All right. Number 2 was area 2 of the 7 steps you have for your successful is understanding the options to evaluate and why. So what are the things when you think about options and what does this look like for you?
Well, going back to the history point, you want to document all the possibilities because it's great to go back and look and understand, well, why didn't we do this other thing? Well, we either decided it wasn't important or it was going to be, too risky or too many resources. So let's document all the options so that we can eliminate to come up with that top 3 that you talked about. Examples of that could be form factors. Maybe it's a great use case to test mobile only and not test mobile, tablet, and desktop and Tamagotchi watch like all at the same time. Let's pick 1 or 2. Software, it could help focus just to say, okay, let's only focus on this stack. And you don't make too many changes. The other that we see all the time is, testing shared versus dedicated devices. With COVID, some companies have moved to just giving dedicated devices. I think one of the use cases we saw, and this was pre-COVID years ago, was that an organization who's had historically rugged shared devices, when they introduced consumer dedicated devices, nobody wanted to use them because nobody wanted to break them. They wanted the devices to stay clean. They were worried that they might break it, and so they didn't use it. And so although everybody liked the device and liked the form factor, the fact that nobody used it means that you weren't going to get the increase in efficiency that you thought you were going to get.
Yeah, and I feel like on the dedicated versus shared, one of the things we've seen too is that a lot of times when you give people a dedicated device, they will take better care of it. I feel like like flight attendants on airplanes, things like that, when they have a device that's theirs, it is theirs and get treated better, right?
Yeah, I think certain use cases, it makes sense. So typically with dedicated devices, I also think the other thing that people don't talk about, and we haven't even talked about this, is how you're going to be using it and where you're going to be using it. As a flight attendant, although I'm on an airplane, I'm on different airplanes. I'm in different airports. And therefore, it makes sense for me to have this dedicated device versus me coming to the same location day in, day out, and needing to bring my dedicated device in versus having one that is shared.
Yep. So area number 3 was prioritizing the outcomes we're looking for. So just knowing what those look like. So maybe you want to dive in and explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So, outcomes, what are our successes? For myself, being a consultant, having to run a lot of these, focusing on the ROI is very important. Not only do I want to prove that what we're doing is valuable or invaluable, but also want to show my value and, the investment not only in BlueFletch is worth it, but, the investment in this POC is either going to save you a lot of money down the road or show that you're not going to save the money that you're going to save. So you're going to save by not investing in this. Improving process, right? That's huge. So everything is about time. Time is money. And so if we can reduce the amount of time or make things more efficient, that always points back to ROI. And so, one of the examples that we had working with the airline was, which way of checking bags is more efficient? Is it the gate agent just after a number of customers going through just automatically checking bags, or allowing the flight attendants in real time to send a message up to the gate agent to say, now you need to start checking bags because we actually have this problem?
Yeah, I think that project, also another thing that stood out to me was the picking up a phone. Mm-hmm. And I never even thought of this, but they had, one of their factors was, can we reduce the amount of time that the gate agent has to either walk down the gate ramp or the flight attendants have to go pick up a phone? Because that is it slows down the loading of a plane. If it takes 2 minutes longer to load a plane times 2,000 planes, it was a $1 billion problem really quickly.
And it also took them away from customers. And that was a big thing as well. And so, imagine going through and trying to get your ticket scanned so you can get on the plane and having to say, well, wait here because I have to answer the phone. Nobody wants to be in that situation. They don't want to put anybody in that situation. And so that was a really big thing for them, always staying engaged with the customer.
Which is a good segue into area 4, which is data, or I think you had it in your article as data.
It's so important, and it gets overlooked many times. And I think you always frame it well when you talk about empirical versus anecdotal. And so the empirical is the world I love to live in, right? Things that we can actually measure. So, I want to know how many times, during a POC, we reboot devices, because that is a leading indicator for me that we have a problem. Because anytime something doesn't work, what do we naturally do as humans in 2020? Turn it off, turn it back on. And then the anecdotal one works in some instances, but just getting feedback. When we worked with Haverty's years and years ago, one of the pieces of anecdotal feedback that we got was, well, one device seems a bit faster. One device seems a bit snappier. One device seems. And so if we didn't have that empirical data, we just would have been living off of, what things seem. But we were able to tie that seem back to actual data, and it made that data just really jump out at us.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the anecdotal. Sometimes I feel like the executive bias can creep in there. Back to your everybody uses iPhones, don't they?
Yes, but iPhones are not built to be used 24 hours a day, 365. Day in, day out, dropped. Coffee spilt on them.
Yeah, my favorite was the CIO that told us this. We went in the warehouse, and there was out of the 100 employees there, I think there were 3 that had iPhones. Everybody else had Android device.
Yes.
He's not happy with that feedback. I think another example we saw was things like the on the actual empirical was being able to measure things. So having the tooling to be able to send data somewhere, whether it's Spreadsheet, whether it's Splunk. I know one of them was we were measuring the cost of network uploads, or the time of network uploads. And I think one of the devices it's like 3 or 4 times faster than the other.
And it was also $300 or $400 more expensive.
Yeah, and they did not. The CIO originally did not want to do that, and then they actually looked at the cost of, if this device takes 20 seconds longer per upload,
We're doing thousands of those uploads a day.
Yeah, it got really expensive, and it cost justified the extra $400 for the nicer device pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it was like the battery was a little bit better. That was a device that seemed a little bit snappier. And so, that empirical data allowed them to understand why this device cost a little bit more.
Yeah. I think area 5, and this is sort of loops back around to the beginning, but like the parameters for success. I always think about this is that what's the movie with Gene Kranz where he's like, failure is not an option. Actually, failure on a POC is a good result.
And it's okay.
Yeah. What's your experiences around failure and the parameters for success versus failure on a POC?
Yeah, I mean, failure is not a terrible outcome. Carell Fryer, when he was here, preached that a lot, and it took a lot of smoothing over and getting people to understand that, hey, although we failed, we learned something. So let's focus on what we learned and move on from that, and just not be down in the dumps because we didn't have the outcome that we thought we were going to have. The one example that we had probably, oh goodness,
10 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 10, 11 years ago.
It was a while ago.
Was kiosks. We're working with a large retailer here, and they wanted to test out the efficacy of kiosks throughout a store and understanding how customers would engage with different kiosks in different locations. And we realized that customers just wanted the same capability in their mobile app. They didn't want to interact with a piece of technology that they weren't familiar with. They didn't want to interact with another screen. They wanted to use what's in their pocket. And so although that was, a decent size investment, they learned a lot and used the rest of that investment to make their mobile app have a much better in-store experience than I think any other retailer.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would look at, might have looked at that from the outside today. This is a failure. You guys, spent, I think it was probably like $7,500 to put those different kiosk formats into the stores, and it was, the amount of money they would have had to spend if they'd rolled it out to 1,000+ stores, and then found out it didn't work. That would have been incredibly bad.
I mean, the other thing that we saw too that we thought consumers might want was, walk in and just grab a tablet and use it. And, if I don't have a tablet at home, or I don't feel comfortable using a tablet, if I didn't bring a tablet to begin with, to your point, nobody wants to carry that extra 2 pounds around. So just invest in giving people better tools and better options that, they already have.
Yeah, and that goes back to that form factor thing too. So if you're testing different size devices, there's the big screen tablet, the medium size. And I remember at one point in time, I think a client was testing tablets and they had like a carrying pouch for it, and it didn't get used. Everybody wanted the handheld size device they could scan with, put in their pocket or put in their
apron or vest or whatever.
Yeah, they did not want to have to carry around another thing on them that was 2 pounds through the day. It's also a little bit awkward when you're with a customer and you have a giant tablet. It's like the guy at the
graduation or a sporting event taking pictures with the iPad. Yeah, you turn into that person.
Oh, yeah. I was at the Grand Canyon last week and I saw a guy doing that. And it's I talked to him, but he's like, yeah, I have a flip phone. I'm like, sir, you were awesome. Number 6 is the continuous learning mindset. So expound on that a little bit. What is the continuous learning mindset? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, it goes back to my point that Carell would bring up all the time. Like, we're here to learn something. So we're here to make the process better. We want to learn. Sometimes things don't go as planned, and that's okay. And we have to figure out why it didn't go as planned, and can we pivot from that? And so I think the companies that naturally do that better or have employees that are empowered to learn and know it's okay to fail, tend to have the better solutions, better outcomes.
Yeah, that has to come from the top too. The CIO and the leadership teams and the VPs have to say it's okay. We do POCs to save money over the long run.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the big tech companies, Apple, Netflix, Google, Amazon, Facebook, or Meta now. They've had a lot of successes, but they've also had a number of public failures. But they continue to iterate. And if you talk to anybody in those organizations, you don't have to worry about losing your job because, the rollout or the beta of something didn't go well. Figure out why it didn't go well. Figure out, can we pivot from that? And if you can't pivot from that, don't invest in that and invest in what's working for you.
Yeah, I think on the other thing with that mindset is don't get sucked into thinking that one thing is the right answer. I always, early on in my career, I had this problem where you'd see something be like, this is the right answer. And I really had to change my mindset over the last 20 years of anything. I just assume that 50% of the decisions I make are going to be wrong. So using the people around you, using actual process to figure out whether something is going to work or not is really important to do.
Yes. So you also have to learn that from yourself, but you also have to be able to coach the people around you and coach up. So for us being consultants, it's very hard coming into an organization where, you're talking to a CIO, a CTO, or a CEO, or COO, sometimes even the CFO, and trying to encourage them or trying to get them to understand that point.
What is it? I know the Android numbers look better, but Windows 8 mobile, don't you think that's the right answer?
Yes. Our Android's not secure. We'll never do Android 5 years later.
Yeah, it's trying to give your teams the ability to make those decisions and do those learnings on their own is important. And then area 7 you called out was Iterates.
Yeah. Pivot. If it doesn't work, change it. If it works, see how you can make it work better.
Now, how fast do you change when something doesn't work? What is your typical advice around or experience around giving people guidance on how quickly should I be trying to change things when POCs or other things are not working?
So it goes back to the earlier points. It depends on what we're testing. So of course, if we're testing one thing versus 2 or 3, you can iterate faster because you're focused on that one thing. It helps when the impact is smaller. So that's why it's nice to POC, maybe one area of the warehouse instead of POCing the entire warehouse, because you can iterate much quicker, focusing on one thing, and then just know the things that you can change. So, our rule of thumb, finger in the wind, we develop on 2-week sprints. And so, probably every 2 to 4 weeks, you could introduce a change. And as that cadence grows, it gets to be about every 2 weeks, because you would have learned something 2 weeks prior, you would have developed it, and then you would be releasing it. And so once you get on that cadence, everybody becomes comfortable with change, and it makes your failures much easier to pivot from. I think oftentimes the organizations that are afraid to fail are the same organizations that like to release software once or twice a year.
Yeah.
The more you iterate, the more you're okay with rolling out with change and knowing that you have an organization that can support you from the top, but also from your workers that understand that we're constantly trying to improve, and sometimes we may not hit the mark, and we need you all to have patience with us.
Yeah, and I think another thing with iterating too is I like when you're getting the feedback from the guys. An example I think of is there was a guy, Carlos, down at Loading Dock, one of the companies we were doing this with, and he's like, this would be really great to have this. And we made that change, got it in there, and we got an instant advocate of the project from one of the guys in operations on the floor. And that sort of spread across the warehouse, and we got more buy-in by actually taking that and having those changes along the way, which was really good. And then, I think the other question I had for you is when you think about timing of a POC, what is the size or right time for how long it should be? Is it 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks? Do you have any back to that sort of finger in the wind rule of thumb type of thing? What is your guidance around that?
So I think 4 weeks is the shortest amount of time it should take from start to getting software out in the field. The longest is probably 12 weeks. You shouldn't spend an entire quarter to get a POC rolled out. And you could probably roll a POC, shorter than 4 weeks if it's, really, really small and really, really contained. But 4 weeks is probably the longest time to actually, define the POC, do requirements and design, actually develop something very small and get it approved and deployed. 4 weeks, a month is probably that window. For how long a POC should run, I feel like it can run infinitely. You shouldn't have something in beta like Google. It shouldn't be like Gmail in beta.
4 years later.
Yeah, for 4 entire years. But you could have a group within your organization where ideas can come in like an on-ramp and leave like an exit ramp. And then a new idea can come in. And so you can always be in this constant learning mode with POCs. But I mean, POCs shouldn't probably last longer than 16 weeks, 20 weeks. Like you can learn if something's going to be successful in that amount of time. In that longer period of time, you probably would have learned a few things. And so when you go to roll things out, it wouldn't just be one thing. It'd be a few different changes.
Another just question I have around iterating fast. How do you handle the things like architecture review boards, security approval? Like what does that look like? I feel like a lot of times those things can just be blockers that just sit there and you're stuck in an ARB or a InfoSec review. How do you handle that? How should leadership handle that or guide people in handling that?
So organizations should have a separate ramp for doing POCs and probably a separate ramp for pilots, which is just a POC that is production ready. You want it to live and bake a little bit longer, and so getting those approvals should be a little bit lower. What typically guards those approvals is the time it's allowed to be out in production. So usually we've gotten around architecture review boards and security and InfoSec by saying, okay, we're only going to go to this one site. We're only going to impact this one role. It's only going to live for this long. Here's what we're testing. And so, it's like, turning out your router, turning off your router in your house, right? You want to impact as few people as possible. And so you try to pick a time and you try to let people know, okay, I'm going to do this thing at 2 a.m.
I turn off the router when it's dinner time.
Yeah, exactly.
Kids need to come to the dinner table. And I guess this wasn't in your article, but it's just sort of a pro tip we've gotten both internally at Blue Fletch and then working with a lot of clients is around understand R&D tax credits. So in the U.S. specifically, there are tax credits, both federal and a lot of states have this, that if you are doing things that technology items that have uncertainty or you're testing things out, those projects actually qualify as a tax credit. So you can go and apply for it. I think we had one client that saved millions and millions of dollars a year on tax credits.
Yeah,
based on that.
It still blows my mind because I think you were a representative to the IRS on behalf of said client, and they might have saved well in 8 figures.
Yeah, no, but it's if you're it is an investment you have to make, and you're learning things out of it. But there's also tax benefits too. So definitely talk to your. I'm not a tax expert, so talk to your accountant.
Disclaimer.
Not a lawyer either, so talk to them if you need to. But so the key areas, just a quick recap on them. The area 1 was the discovery definition, so define what you need, what you're going to do. Number 2 was options, so understand all your different options you're going to have, make that list, narrow it down.
Eliminate, prioritize.
Yeah. Number 3 was outcomes, so know which outcomes you're trying to measure and have that list. 4 was data.
Collect
Four
data.
datas.
Yeah, 4 datas. Just you can never not have enough data.
Yeah.
And it keeps the finger pointing down as well. Like to be able to prove something is successful or to show that it's a failure and it's not, you giving a big speech and it's just pointing to the data to say like, it's true or false, 0 or 1. Please collect it. It's so important.
Number 5 was the defining the parameters, which maybe probably should be retitled as failure is an option.
Failure is an option.
Number 6 was the continuous learning mindset, so grow that within your organization. And number 7 was iterate and keep iterating even within your POCs itself.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the Blue Fletch Mobility Roundup. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out and definitely like and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Enterprise Mobility Roundup podcast. If you enjoyed the discussion, please take a few moments to rate us. If you would like to listen to future episodes, please subscribe. To learn more about mobility topics or submit any questions, visit us at bluefletch.com.